And it was a really interesting scene because you set it up that all your heroes in this series deal with some mental health challenges. And the hero in this scene is having a panic attack, and the heroine helps him calm down, which is such a beautiful example of the partnership that they might have if they figure out how to get together. So I'm curious in terms of mental health, it's easy to understand that humans have been experiencing things like panic attacks the entire time that we've been humans, but
Right.
it also is such like a modern term, and our framework for understanding it, at least in the West, really didn't start until decades after the Regency period. So how do you approach mental health knowing that you have modern readers who will understand the modern framework but historical characters?
So in this, well, because my hero is a duke, so he's the most powerful of his spot in time and place. So, but men experience mental health just as much as women. But you're right, these humans have been having anxiety attacks and panic attacks since the beginning of time. And so there would be like a communal, like, I'm sure back in the day, like, oh, that woman's hysterical was what it was called, but it didn't negate like how to get through it. Like the friend's mother in the scene, she used to have panic attacks, and there were people around her who witnessed it, who talked to her about it, store that information. When she meets the Duke who has the same thing, she's like, oh, I heard once upon a time about a woman who had the same thing. And instead of leaning into the gender roles back then, because I really don't know if men were ever diagnosed with hysteria as
Mm-hmm.
women were, but I know for a fact men have panic attacks. So it it was there. I don't know how much it was talked about, but I'm sure there was a common thread throughout society that was, oh, this is a situation some people experienced. So
Mm-hmm.
just, replaying information and my heroine Clara being so open about it because she's never experienced it. But yeah, she talks about it, and that's a bit of me. So
Yeah. Did you choose to make your heroes the ones who were having mental health challenges explicitly because there's this historic gender dynamic where we think of women as being hysterical?
yes, I know just in my experience of my own life that the men in my life, I mean, men and women, everybody experiences mental health issues. And I personally know men who go through it, but it seems more difficult for them to find a community, to find friends, to talk about it openly. So I wanted to write a series of books where, because my three heroes in this series are also friends, and even they're uncomfortable talking about it with each other, which is very much how the men in my life react. So, but I wanted to explain it that men have problems, and that's okay. If
Yeah.
you go through it, if you search for help, if you do as best you can, you can. It's something that we can all work on, and regardless of gender and stuff. So.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. I think about the alpha hero stereotype sometimes as where we're writing towards the man who is not allowed to have emotions, and then love is an emotion, and so when he starts to experience love, some other emotions come out, and I think that's one of the reasons why it's kind of cathartic to read alpha heroes sometimes, because you
Mhm.
start with like this man who refuses to admit emotions and he's so strong, and then like by the end of the book it's like, oh no, he has a heart. I think the way that you're approaching it is another very interesting and necessary way to say, well, they have emotions, but also there's more to it. Like men have a full spectrum. Sometimes I feel alpha heroes are just like not a real man. they're
Yeah,
just they're
but
just
they're
like symbolizing something else. So I
Mhm.
think that's really interesting that you have explicitly set out to do this. Now, did you do any research? Have you found any interesting stories or anecdotes of people in the period who, wrote in their diaries or anything about experiencing mental health?
I did some research on trying to like find like the history of anxiety and depression disorders, and I think I got back to the mid 1700s, France philosophers were just opening up about it, like just trying to, I don't have my research with me, but they had different names for it. It didn't
Hmm.
sound very nice. I'm sure it was nice at the time period for somebody to read a French manuscript and be like, oh, I also have whatever they called it, like terrible disease or something. Like they had terrible names for it.
Yeah.
But it was at least a step towards modern diagnosis for mental maladies and stuff like that. Because, I mean, depression has gone on since the beginning of time. So obviously, ancient Greeks talked about it, but it was like mid 17th century is when they had a resurgence or an interest in how the mind works.